presentation today. This is our special presentation. And with me, we have a very special guest. She is a medical doctor, an acupuncturist, an athlete, an excellent athlete, by the way, and a best-selling author, I understand. Please welcome Dr. Karen Kahn. Hey, Dr.
Hello.
Karen.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone. So excited to be on here with you.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. You're always so amazing and so fantastic with this. As you know, we've done many presentations now over the years, and it was really a thrill for me when you accepted to be part of the NOVA conference. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
And today we are going to be going through questions that have been on our members and mind of our community is, given that X39 is our top product, how do we combine X39 with other patches? And we have a ton of information that we are going to be sharing with everyone today.
That's exciting. And, you know, I think, David, I often say to people, like, you're like this amazing genius brainiac guy, you know, and I'm like, he doesn't need me, but I understand, you know, given that, you know, I've treated patients, I'm now retired now from my practice, but sometimes having the clinician view is kind of another perspective. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. All right. We're going to have a lot of fun with it, and it'll be very educational for everyone. So let's go ahead and get started with it. So I thought a good place to start would be to establish some of the basics that people can look for when they're developing an overall profile of their health. In other words, we have to start with the foundation, and we have to start with this baseline of where are you at. And, you know, so from a clinician's point of view, what are some of the things that you like to do with patients when you're looking at, you know, establishing this baseline for their health?
Well, you know, one of the things I wanted to point out for me personally as an acupuncturist as well as a medical doctor is that I noticed that there are certain people that don't heal very quickly or heal very well. And in addition to, you know, some baseline tests that a regular medical or conventional medical doctor might do, some of these things that I notice are not seen on blood tests. And I think they're important. And one of the main ones is, you know, how balanced is one's autonomic nervous system. I know that's a lot of words there, but I call it brain balance. So people that know me know my protocol, which is a brain balancing protocol where we put the Eon patch near the head, and that helps people even very, very quickly, you know, get that stillness and de-stress much faster. So what I've noticed, David, is that in about, for my patients anyway, that 5 or 10% that had difficulty, it was like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, I found that using the patches was very, very helpful in helping them get that centered and that autonomic nervous system healthier, so then they can, you know, do other things. And I know in the basics, you're going to be talking about some lifestyle issues. And I just wanted to share that I have found personally that when people have more energy and they're feeling better thanks to the patches, they are much better at committing to and following through their lifestyle changes. So I just wanted you to know that.
Wow, that's really interesting. You know, actually, that's something that we never cover, but it's a really important part. Actually, it's probably the best place to start, which is on mindset. Because if someone has, you know, an attitude that they're going to succeed, they're going to achieve something, be very positive, of course, that is going to begin a healthy foundation for actually achieving a goal. I bet as an athlete, you and James were never able to accomplish a specific move in ice skating unless you really believed that you were going to accomplish it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the other aspect I wanted to share too is that I had a patient one time that this was back when we only had energy enhancer patches. and he had a very severe fatigue, and I think he lived in a moldy home, which was part of the problem. But I had spent months doing acupuncture every other week, counseling, coaching, super nice guy, but he couldn't get off the chocolate. He wouldn't do the walking. He'd forget the hydration. Like he just couldn't seem to make headway. So at that time, I was a little pensive about having him spend extra money on the patches just because he wasn't already doing what I wanted him to do. But I thought, you know what the heck, it's not going to hurt. So I said, look, I really want you to try these patches. It may help your energy. And then I'll see you in 2 weeks. So he comes back in 2 weeks and he's like, yep, I started walking every day. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And I said, well, how's the chocolate cravings? Oh yeah, I haven't had chocolate in 2 weeks. And,
wow.
I said, have you been hydrating? He goes, yeah. And so what it wasn't so much his mindset. He did not have enough chi or vital force to even do the minimum of the lifestyle changes I'd asked him. So that was a big learning for me as a medical doctor. Oh, if I can support the energy system, and all your patches increase the energy system, right? So if I can support the energy system, they feel better and they can actually go and do more of those things that they know to do for themselves.
You know, that's so interesting. There's a number of different ways that people can measure the energy systems. And over the years, we've done clinical studies looking at both methods. If we look at the slide that we have on some of the blood testing that people can do, one of the tests that I often recommend is organic acids. Another blood test that I really like is looking at different types of inflammatory markers because they're so key in overall health. Now, looking at an organic acid test, this is really going to give people a measure of what's going on in terms of the way they manufacture energy in the cell. And if they're missing something, let's say they're missing a vitamin like coenzyme Q10, this type of information is going to show up in the organic acid test. It's also very valuable to look at some basic inflammatory markers. And of course, a person's clinician will have that information on different panels. The basic ones are things like C-reactive proteins and inflammatory cytokines. You might look at homocysteine levels because that would show someone if they're at risk for having a heart attack and so forth. I also really like food allergy testing. I don't know how you feel about this. I don't know if we've ever discussed it, but I've used a company called All Tests. I don't have any stock in the company or anything like that. There may be other companies that do this, but the basic idea is sometimes people can have an issue with their health. They're like, I'm trying everything. I'm not getting any results. I don't understand what's going on. And it could be something in their diet that they have a mild allergy to. And it's upsetting the microbiome, the health of their gut, creating inflammation, and then reducing the capacity to absorb nutrients. So the food allergy testing can be surprisingly valuable.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, in places like California and Vermont, that they have, in the US I'm talking about, they have a plethora of lab tests that can be done. But I live in New York State, which is the most strict of all the states, and some of the testing that you're familiar with, we're not even allowed to do. And in fact, one of the allergy test companies that I used to do, Alcat, they lost their ability to do it in New York State. They could not jump through enough hoops.
That's terrible.
Recertified, yes. And so I ended up, finding a company in the UK who did hair testing, and how they did it was through bioresonance, and could tell if somebody had an intolerance, less allergy, but more intolerance to a particular substance. And they could even tell if there were like heavy metal stresses and things like that through bioresonance. So, some of these tests are a little bit challenging to get in certain states and certain locales. But for those that are lucky enough to be able to do that, I mean, certainly the inflammatory markers are kind of regular tests, so everybody can do that.
Right.
But some of the other ones are a little bit more specialized. But it's great if people can get that done.
Absolutely. And you brought up a great point, which is we could do an entire 1 or 2 hour webinar on all of the different types of tests that are available. And when we get into the electronic tests, they can be extraordinarily valuable. So you have the EMOS testing, which is a Japanese technique for measuring the energy going through the meridians. There's the medical infrared imaging, so you can see the thermal signature of individuals. Of course, we've done a lot of EIS testing and GDV testing over the years, and those are other measures of the bioelectrical system in the body. And every practitioner, of course, is going to have kind of their preference for what approach they want to take. But I think the main thing here, so we can move on, is that it's really important to establish the baseline. And then when someone has a baseline, they can know whether or not the protocols that they're implementing are having a positive or a neutral or a negative effect. So getting that baseline testing done is really important. Okay. Now, let's talk about some other basics. And I know as a clinician that you are super tuned into this, and maybe I'll let you start this part off, but it's just on the basic idea that there are things that are so fundamental to our health that if people aren't doing them, they're never really going to achieve the optimum results that they may be looking for.
Right, David, you often emphasize in our webinars about getting proper sleep. And this is definitely a challenge for some people. And of course, for that, sleep insomnia symptom, we have some Lifewave solutions for that. But outside of that, I did want to mention some of the things that you have on the slide is that as a medical doctor, we weren't taught a lot of this. We were taught about sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene was like, well, don't drink caffeine if you're having difficulty sleeping, or don't drink caffeine later in the day, have a dark room, try not to be too active at night, so that, unlike what I do, stay online in front of a screen, well into the, late night, because that keeps you activated and awake, and all the blue light from the screen can do that, so we talk about having the room dark because, the pineal and, there's signals that the body gets of I'm awake, I should be awake, or I should be asleep, and different hormones are made. So sleeping in a dark room is important. And I don't know about the wear socks part, but I have to say that I do that in the cold winter.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure you have data to support that.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing when this is going to air, I will have already done a training on sleep, and I'm going to pull a clinical study. I actually heard about this on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he had an expert on about sleep, and that was a new one on me. So I had to look up the clinical study and see it. I had to try it, and sure enough, wearing socks and keeping your feet warm will improve circulation and can improve sleep by about an extra 30 minutes or so.
Wow.
So that's certainly something that anybody could do, starting today, and achieve better sleep.
Oh, that's great. And I would just add to that, not that it was in the study, but, natural fibers are nice and optimal if somebody can sleep with, sheets. And remember, we spend a lot of our lifetime, right, in bed. So you want to have the least toxic materials around you. So having organic cotton or bamboo, even your socks, I have merino wool socks and organic cotton socks, and being a sensitive person like I am, I can literally feel the difference between the different types of clothing that I wear and how it feels at night, and not having toxic smelly stuff, off gassing, right, from your pillow or your the other thing sleep wise I was going to mention, the number one thing I want people to do is turn off your phone. Don't even have it in the room with you. Now, if you must have, because some people, they say, I have to have my cell phone because I really like waking up to that alarm versus the regular alarm. I get it. I use an old cell phone as an alarm as well, but it's on airplane mode, and it has a whole bunch of stickers on it of EMF, protection devices and things like that. But I can't tell you, David, what percentage of people that I have met in clinic, at talks, lectures, in schools, that they think nothing of sleeping next to this radiation device and having their head irradiated or their body irradiated all night long and wondering why they're not sleeping and they're grumpy. And when I tell the parents, like, you got to take this phone away, and then the kids are not happy. But after they do that, and they stop, they have it on airplane mode, they take it away completely, maybe they're grounded, the kids turn into angels.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah, like their attitude changes. It's because it's so stressful to have this radiation next to the body. So I think if you do nothing else, is make sure that even cordless phones are a radiating device, depending on which type you get, and even the old clock radios, which nobody uses anymore, would have some sort of radiation as well. So you want to get all that stuff out of your bedroom and, clear your bedroom as much as possible from extra electronic equipment you don't need.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think the other stuff we've covered many times, and it's kind of self-evident. So let's get to some of the things that people are anxious to hear us talk about. And how we're going to be combining X39 with other patches. What patches would we combine and why? What type of effects are we specifically looking for? And just as a framework, at this point, we've completed over 90 clinical studies. So we've done blood testing, urine testing, a whole plethora of electronic testing, heart rate variability, electrointerstitial scanning, medical infrared imaging, and on and on. And so you can go to the Lifewave website, go to the science section, and you can see more about that. But basically, when we make a claim about the product, we have substantiation for it. Now, a little basics about stem cells, which are really pretty interesting. And the first thing is, and maybe not surprisingly, is that stem cells are attracted to inflammation. And so this is, of course, a completely natural process where when there is an injury, and now we're talking about wound repair here. We're not talking about normal cell replacement. But there's an injury and there's a release of radical oxygen species. These are naturally occurring chemicals in the body. This triggers an inflammatory process, and we need this inflammation to start breaking down cells that don't belong there anymore. And just like a radio transmitter, the stem cells are attracted to the site of the inflammation. Now, this is a positive and a negative because the stem cells can be destroyed by inflammation as well. And, Dr. Karen, of course, as people get older and they are more prone to having chronic states of inflammation, they haven't taken care of themselves, and their body doesn't clear out the inflammation as much, this really becomes an impediment to healing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, as a clinician, we didn't learn a lot about, stem cells in medical school for sure. And it's only very recent that stem cell therapy clinics have been popping up, all over America and other places in the world. And unfortunately, some folks have been taken advantage of by some unscrupulous people who are kind of getting past the FDA, if you will, and injecting things that either don't have stem cells in them or they've even been tainted with, infectious agents and have actually caused harm. So I think the lovely thing about the Lifewave patches and doing stem cell enhancement or support, if you will, with the patches is that it's really low risk. Because I would be very, very reticent to refer my patients to a stem cell clinic right now, given the options because of the risk of bleeding and infection, and you don't know what you're getting. And some of these commercials are really slick, and people are, spending $25,000 a year on these. Right. And I feel like, if you inject stem cells into one joint, I mean, that all you're treating is that one joint, and then your body's going to destroy them. And your stem cells, even if it's your own stem cells, and you're not really allowed, at least legally here in the States, to actually take someone's stem cells and grow them. Apparently you can't do that and re-inject them. So it's kind of crazy because then it's a drug. I don't understand that piece. but it's kind of risky and it does not work as well. Whereas the patches actually help to support the whole body, not just the spot where you're injecting it. So it's pretty interesting, that the stem cells both like like inflammation, but also can be destroyed by it. And the phototherapy is really helpful to help balance that out, I believe.
Yeah, at each one of these stages, it can help us understand where the patches can help. And then also it really comes back to, again, establishing that foundation that when we're getting enough rest, our immune systems are functioning well. When we're hydrating, we're facilitating detoxification and energy production in the body, and on and on. And at each one of these stages, since stem cells are destroyed by inflammation, if we can use a product like Eon to manage the inflammation in the body, then actually X39 can work better. When we're looking at how stem cells are protected by antioxidants, because they're really a primordial cell, they're a universal cell in the case of pluripotent cells, and the stem cells will eventually become other cells like muscle tissue, liver, kidney, and so forth. So if we're keeping our antioxidant levels like glutathione, vitamin A, vitamin D, coenzyme Q10, et cetera, if we're keeping those antioxidants elevated and balanced, then the overall health of the body and the stem cell activity are going to benefit as well. So just a quick overview for those people here that are new. Now we have a lot of people here that are new, so we'll just go through this quickly. But as you said, Dr. Karen, the patches work based on phototherapy or light therapy. Light therapy has been around for thousands of years, but it's really just the past 100 years that light therapy has been studied scientifically. And what do you do with these patches? You can apply them virtually anywhere. You remove the backing, you apply it where the instructions indicate, and we'll talk about some alternative places to apply them, but they're activated by your body heat. In the case of the X39, some people like to apply them near the site of an injury. It's not necessary. You can apply it behind the neck or below the belly button, and it's going to go to work. The patches are activated by body heat. They start to stimulate the skin with very low levels of light, and then they're going to produce a specific effect. So in the case of X39, they stimulate the skin with light, and this will cause the body to increase production of a peptide that activates the stem cells. Okay, so let's get into some of the fun stuff now on these principles of patching. And Dr. Karen, I know that you have a lot to say about patching principles.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and show the whole model here. So we're gonna do it in a way that's easy for people to remember. And we're gonna start really basic, and I'm kind of like interviewing David here about his thoughts. I'll chime in with mine as well. So people often will ask, well, what patches do I use? Like they're like, well, I have this symptom or that symptom, or I've been diagnosed with XYZ, now I have these symptoms. And they're constantly asking, well, what patch do I use? So I'll give my perspective, Dave will give his perspective. Then we talk about when, sort of like, so when do I know if I start with one patch, like when do I add another one? Like, do I wait a day? Do I wait a month? Like, when do I do that? The other question that comes up really frequently for people is, well, where do I put it? And that's because I'm an acupuncturist, so I thought I get inundated with lots of people saying, well, which acupuncture point do I need? And I always try to simplify it down. And yes, of course, people can use on specific points on the body, but amazingly, like you said before, it does not necessarily mean that you have to know all these things. So we're going to cover that a little bit. And then the how is like, how do we combine? Like, how do we use the patches, and how often, and that kind of thing. So yeah, so let's start with the what. That will be the next slide. Yeah, so I don't know about you, David, but as a clinician, and before X39 was invented in the office, I would almost always, I would think 9 times out of 10, actually recommend the Eon first. And the reason is because I could do a little testing in the office. I could tell how stressed or how balanced their brain was or nervous system was. And most people who come to my office were not balanced. Makes sense, right? So I would end up using an Eon patch, and that would be their homework. They would use an Eon patch every day or every night for however long, and we would retest them. And of course, they came to me for acupuncture, so I did do that for them as well. And I just found that they didn't require as much acupuncture as often. They would get better faster. And so the first patch that I recommended in the past was the Eon. But after you've invented the X39, then things changed. Not to say that Eon doesn't have that amazing place in there, but the X39 being the second generation patch has so many things that it covers, you know, that it helps and supports, that has become now my first favorite to recommend to someone first. And then I tend to wait a little bit, depending on their symptoms and seeing what their feedback is before introducing anything new. So just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I would agree absolutely with that. Is prior to X39, my go-to patch would have been Eon. And the reason is because of the anti-aging and some of the age reversal benefits of Eon. Of course, the ultimate goal of Lifewave is that we want to be able to introduce products that create meaningful age reversal and youth renewal. And one of the things that we see with organisms that are, for all intents and purposes, immortal, meaning that their cells divide and the cells don't age, they have perfect control over the inflammatory process. And you don't see any types of oxidative stress or inflammatory stress. So the Eon patch will help to mimic that to a degree. The Eon patch triggers the release of a peptide in the liver, which is part of the primitive immune system. So this peptide, in fact, is not a direct antioxidant or anti-inflammatory, but it produces that behavior in the body because it acts as a signaling molecule. So any case, long story short, that would have been my go-to patch as well as Eon, and of course now it's X39. But of course, we always want to recommend the patch that is going to be for that person's specific goal. So if it was, I work with a lot of athletes around the world, and they just want to know, how can I improve my performance and recovery? And today, the combination of X39 and carnosine would be a great combination. So I might start there. If someone's looking to detoxify, then, glutathione is going to be part of that protocol. But in terms of like an umbrella or a catch-all, X39 and Eon would be a very difficult combination to beat.
Mm-hmm. And I just find that, even for pain relief, although not everyone gets pain relief with X39, or at least not right away, that it's worth trying first, because I'm looking at it as a foundation to help repair, restore, reset those genes. And that's that foundation. And then the other patches can delve into or help those other kinds of symptoms that they're dealing with. So that's my personal, clinical preference, if you will. And it's not wrong, of course, for anyone else. If they're like, wow, I really, would like to work on sleep, and X39, I'm not really sure, that alone is going to help. Yeah, you can definitely combine things. But I actually made a chart, which David knows about, that is in our Facebook group, that like has all the patches and what they do. And you'll see that X39, check mark, check mark, check mark, do all the different things. So yeah, so we're very similar in this space. So we can go to the next slide.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when should I introduce another patch? Yeah, so I'd love to hear from you before I put in my 2 cents here.
Yeah, so, in healing, you can definitely go too fast with some people. And it would be a good analogy might be exercise. Let's say that you took someone that was clinically obese To put them on high intensity interval training is going to be a mistake on so many different levels. They're just going to put their body into a state of shock, much less that they're not ready to do that level of intensity, and it's not going to have the correct effect. So, for example, you would start someone off with just some basic walking, let their nervous system accommodate, and then go from there. So this has a lot to do with someone's overall health. If someone has not been taking really good care of themselves, I would maybe just start them with X39 before combining other things. But if they were suffering with pain, then at minimum, they'd be using X39 and Icewave. And reason for making that comment is because all of the patches are going to improve energy, mobilize toxins. And if you have someone that's not drinking a lot of water, maybe they're not exercising, they're not eating right, they could get a very severe detox from doing too many patches too quickly. So this is something to pay attention to. So that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're very similar in this way. I did have one distributor way back when. I had emailed him and said, this is, given what you've told me, this is how I would start. Start with this patch and this patch and this patch. Well, he kind of forgot about it. So when he got his diamond package, he texted me the next day and said, I feel terrible. I said, what's going on? He says, well, I put all the patches on. I'm so tired today. And I said, wait. We discussed you using this one first, then this one. And he goes, oh, I forgot. I put them all on. He had the glutathione, he had the eon, the carnosine, the energy, everything. I said, okay, take them all off. Okay. And let's start with the eon. Okay. And then and depending on, again, and this is why in some ways we do network marketing, and this because it's really good to have that connection and that support, from the distributor. You're not just going to get it off the shelf and then not have anybody to talk to, right? So a lot of people do ask, like, why is this network marketing? I'm like, well, that's why, because you need that connection, that support, that training, and not that you need complex training, but the experience. So I will tell people that I said, we'll try this, first. And then I'll say, depending on the person, I'll say, if, X39 doesn't help your pain, for example, then we're going to introduce Icewave. And that can be fairly soon. But as far as using glutathione or carnosine or eon, I will usually wait at least 2 to 3 days before adding a new one, checking in on their detox, making sure they're not too tired or headachy or whatever. And if they're okay with that, then we can add on depending on, and in the order of their priorities. So if someone's priority is pain relief, then it's going to be Icewave first before the others. If someone's, stress and inflammation's their thing, then I might add eon first before Icewave. So we're kind of flexible that way. And I like you, I like to start simple and then kind of add on, because I don't want people to get overwhelmed with too many instructions. Yeah, that's such a great point, because simplicity is an important part of this. People that have been using the patches for a couple of years, or maybe even just as quick as a couple of months, to them, putting patches all over the body is no big deal. Right. But for someone new coming in, it's going to be overwhelming. So the idea of, hey, just use X39, it really does a lot. It's simple, put it anywhere. And this gets them started and eases them into the concept of having a patch on the body and, of course, combining them with other things. So sometimes it definitely pays to go slow with these things. Mm-hmm. You will get the one or two, nerds like me, who are like just totally like in love with researching and understanding it and trying things and, that kind of thing. But at least I know my body really well, so I'll know when to slow down, when to change things. Not everyone's like that. So you will have, for people listening, you may have somebody on your team or a customer who's just so bound and determined they're going to, try it all in a month. And that's fine. You just want to keep the communication lines open. It's not wrong. We're just, we're just sharing our perspective based on our experience.
Right. Okay. Over to you.
Yeah. So where should I put the patch? Well, this is so funny because everyone's like, where should I put the patch? And usually my answer is what the brochure says.
Yep.
in my personal experience, and for I can say this for many of the clinicians as well, you know, Dr. Dennis Lobstein and Dr. Quila Ryder and Kathy Arnaud and Christine Fisher, you know, we were trainers with Lifewave, and in our experience, about 85% of people would get the result that we're looking for just using the points in the brochure. And people want to get really fancy, and I understand there's a lot of protocol, out there. I've got my own, videos on YouTube for specific symptoms to help people out. Other people have other, sites that help with, kind of a recipe book. But I would just have to caution people that, sometimes the recipe books can get really complicated really quickly, and that's where they do 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different patches all at once. And it might sound really good on paper, but unless you are a seasoned Lifewave patcher and have done quite a bit of detoxifying already just using the patches, it could feel yucky, as you use all these patches. And it's incredibly expensive if you're just introducing someone for the first time. Hey, here's the facelift protocol, and here's these 6 patches you need to use every day, right? So it's not always the best thing. I like to say use the brochure points, of course, based on their symptoms, use the brochure points. For that 85%, for the 15% that it does not work as well for, they want better results, then I said, okay, now we can get a little bit fancier. You've tried the brochure points, maybe you want better results. Maybe we can look something up together on, on acupuncture or acupressure points for that particular symptom, and then you can be more creative. So I think the patches are very forgiving in terms of, where you put them. People have put them in all sorts of spots that, I would not have recommended, but they misunderstood me or they saw something online. But they weren't harmed by it. But I think that my principles is like, start with what's in the brochure, or at least talk to your distributor about it. If there's a clinician on your team, like we can always do Q&A or whatever, if you want to get fancy, but try not to think fancy first. So that's my take on this.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely, is start with the basics. The basics work really well. They're time tested, they work. We use them in the clinical studies, and experimentation is fun. But for someone new, you really want to have guidance on it. So work with a practitioner, work with someone that's been using the patches for some time before you stray from the basic instructions. So we're definitely in agreement on that point.
Excellent. So how often should I use the patches? So we have so many different patches, David, and they're all so exciting. They all sound great. They all do amazing things. So people want to know, I'd love to see, hear your take on how you answer this question. So how often should I be using X39? How often should I be using Eon?
Yeah, some of this will depend on the patch and what the outcome is that you're looking for. Instead of starting with X39, because that really is a daily wear patch, let's take a case of glutathione. Glutathione is super interesting, and we've done studies over the years where we've looked at what would happen if we use glutathione 5 days a week versus 7 days a week. We did that study with Dr. Sherry Greenberg, and we were measuring the bioelectrical activity of the organs in the body. We also worked with Dr. Homer Nazaran at the University of Texas in El Paso. And what was interesting was we found out that people that used the glutathione patch 7 days a week did about twice as well as people that only used it 5 days per week. And the thinking behind this was, first, we didn't think that using the product 7 days a week would produce that magnitude of an improvement versus 5 days. But the conclusion we came to is we're constantly being bombarded by environmental toxins. So this is something that we need to protect against daily. Now, the good news is that X39 will produce a mild increase in glutathione, as will the Eon patch. So you don't have to use the glutathione patch daily if you don't want to, if you're using X39. But where something like glutathione is valuable is if someone wants to go through a heavy metal detox, or other detox protocol, they could use it for a week to 2 weeks, and then just use it periodically after that. So that would be with glutathione. Now, other patches like carnosine can very much depend on how often you're exercising. That could be a 3-day per week, 5-day per week, or 7-day per week. X39 is more of a daily wear patch. And then on something like Silent Nights and Olivita, because they will both help to improve sleep, that's something that people can experiment with a little bit and say, you know, I want to try each of those patches different nights and see what my quality of sleep is like with those. So it definitely depends on which patch as far as how I would recommend how often you use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, myself as well. Each person's habits, what they're doing as an athlete. I will often use energy enhancers every day in addition to the X39. I love Eon. I have found that the Eon helps me with flexibility, probably because of the decrease in inflammation. The carnosine, my husband and I basically use that every single night. I didn't before, because I know, like you taught previously, that the carnosine can last a little bit in the body, unlike glutathione, which kind of disappears once you use it. It's kind of gone. It's the body uses it. But because of all the heavy lifting, jumping, and all the weightlifting and everything like that, we notice, James and I, that when we use the carnosine on a regular basis, like every night, that we wake up and it's almost like we didn't work out. Like sometimes there's maybe a little bit of muscle soreness, but I got to tell you, when I was much, much younger, I would do probably a quarter of what I can do now, and I would be so sore for days. I would be in so much pain that I wouldn't be able to train for days. So, just using these patches have revolutionized my ability to do what I love.
Awesome. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the patch combinations. And I guess, we could preface this by saying, and you hinted at this before, maybe not hinted at it, there are any number of different protocols that are out there, many, many. Of course, we've seen so many different protocols over the years, different ways to combine them, some very, very clever. But now what we specifically want to focus on is we're using X39 as the base product. And now let's look at some applications and how we're going to combine X39 with other products. So we're going to start off with our favorite, which is X39 and Eon. And there are just so many benefits to this combination. As a matter of fact, most of us are on budgets, and in terms of if you started with X39 and wanted to add one other patch, I can't think of anything better than the combination of X39 and Eon.
Absolutely. Eon, like I said before, when people weren't healing very well, their brain balance was off. And then once we used Eon and they would do this homework, they would put it on every day, they would improve so much better. They would just pass, that stuck point that they were at. And I tell people, when people go, well, how long do I have to, wear this? Is it addictive? Like, is it like, do I have to wear it otherwise? And I tell them, well, you know what? We have stress. I'm sorry, we're human. Stress happens. I mean, elections happen. I mean, there's all sorts of stress going on in the world. And our reaction to that is really going to dictate how well we thrive or not. And so I think if you have something like Eon that helps you with that focus, that inflammation, and what dis-ease or disease doesn't have inflammation. We're not talking about treating disease. We're talking about the inflammation. So for me, I think the Eon is a no-brainer. I really love this combination.
So of course, there's any number of ways that we could apply X39 and Eon. X39, of course, behind the neck or below the belly button, either one of those you can use. We've tested both in clinical studies, and protocol that I really like, because so many people are suffering with some type of chronic or acute pain, is instead of going to Icewave, which can be a little bit more complicated, starting with X39, let's say on the back of the neck or below the belly button, and then the Eon patch directly at the point of pain. And it's amazing how well that works and how simple it is, and it's very duplicatable.
Yeah, that's great. I was so happy to learn that from you, David, because I hadn't thought of that, and I think it really works, especially if somebody doesn't have the Icewave and they're used to using Icewave to patch, to move the energy, and it works extremely well. And they have X39 and Eon. Then I have found that this would be very, very efficacious to use this for pain. Now, you had put down on here large intestine 4. Aside from knowing what the point does, just curious how you came up with that combination.
Yeah, I suppose that I love acupuncture. I'm not an acupuncturist, of course, but I am a fan of energy medicine. And of course, I've been a student of acupuncture for many years. And there are a number of primary acupuncture points on the human body that when you read through literature, you read through studies, you read through acupuncture books, there are a few points that keep coming up. One of them is stomach 36, another is large intestine 4. I had this conversation with Norm Shealy, and he had said that in his discussions with many acupuncturists, that he came to the conclusion that large intestine 4 was the most valuable acupuncture point on the body. And of course, for those of you that aren't acupuncturists, this point is going to be located on either the right hand or the left hand. It's you can stimulate either point or both. There you go, right there. It's I believe that's Higu, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so yes, that's the Chinese name for it. So you apply the Eon patch there. And the benefit, why do you want to stimulate the large intestine? Well, this is what's going to activate the immune system. And many people might have an issue with inflammation in their gut, and Eon can help with that. So, yeah, you're getting a little bit of a double bang for the buck here by stimulating the immune system to support health, in addition to using Eon to reduce inflammation. Now,
that's great. And large intestine 4, I wanted to mention, is really good for anything in the head and neck area. So if somebody has teeth issues or eye issues or gum issues, there's specific points for certain parts of the body, but just in general, as acupuncturists, if somebody has something going on up here, like nose, sinus, whatever symptom, large intestine 4, headache is the other one, is a very, very common point that we use like almost all the time.
Now, you like the point behind the right ear. What's the story with that point?
Yeah, so when I was discovering the brain balancing protocol with the Eon, I had a guy come in and he was way off on his testing. He wasn't even a patient of mine. He said to me, can you decalcify my pineal gland? And I'm like, not sure about that. But I said, let me do this brain balance test on you. So I did. And he was way off. And I said, have you had a head injury? And he goes, oh yeah, I've been in a coma twice. So normally at that point, to correct this brain imbalance, I was using energy enhancer patches. And you might remember this protocol: white and right, tan on left, white in the front, tan on the back, and another white or glutathione on top. Yeah, and we would get into this incredible meditative state, right? Well, guess what? I ran out. So here I'm at the office. All I had was like Eon. So I was like, So I said to him, I'm going to do a little experiment on you. So I'm going to put this patch near your head on different acupuncture points, and I'm going to retest you. He said, sure. So he takes his hat off. He's bald. And I'm like, great.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we tried different points. And what I found was that he would balance out with some of these strong points that you can use on the head. So we used the third eye, the top of the head, the back of the neck. I think the back of the neck didn't work on him as much as some of my other patients, so I kept testing people after this. And then behind the right ear. And because Eon is a positively charged patch, I tend to use it on the center line of the right side. So we used it behind the right ear. And it was one of the points that balanced him right out. And he used it for a couple of weeks, and there was nothing wrong with him. Like, he didn't have any symptoms. But when he came back, I said, well, do you like it? And he goes, oh yeah, it's great. I said, well, what's great about it? You didn't have any symptoms. He goes, I like people more. I said, what? He says,
Wow.
well, people used to annoy me, but I'm really tolerant. And the other thing is, I'm luckier. I said, wow. He said, yeah, I just tend to be at the right place at the right time. And I just kind of chalked it up as, okay, this is a strange guy. But I remembered what he said. And when I started using it with my patients, they also gave me similar feedback. I had a friend of mine, Dan Sullivan, who was using this brain balancing, for the first time. And he says, I think this lucky thing really works. I said, really? He goes, yeah, I just bought a house. And he'd been looking for a while, but I just never thought he'd just, call me up and say, I just bought a house. He says, yeah, I was in the right place at the right time, met this person, and it was the right house. And I just bought it.
My son told me that the Mega Millions lottery, which I never played, just hit over $1 billion. And I know somebody up in Detroit won that. So this information would have come in handy a couple weeks ago, I think. But now that, that's really fascinating. So are you saying that this point then stimulates the pineal gland? Because normally, we would think of the third eye point here, but you're saying you can do it right behind the right ear.
Well, not exactly. So this point actually in Chinese medicine is anmian, which is really for relaxation and sleep and things like that. So this is a great point for sleep. But also, Dr. Dennis likes to say that, the back of the ear, the front of the ear, there's a ton of mapping of all the different parts of the body right on the ear. So you're also, in his estimation, stimulating points on the ear. Now, why it worked this way, I think, is really that I did some study with a professor called, a colleague called Jeffrey Thompson, and he's very well known for his brainwave entrainment music CDs. He was a doctor of chiropractic before, so he's quite famous. And what I learned is that when the right and left brains, parts of the brain are coherent and they're both firing, so we have whole brain function, that's when the ahas occur.
Okay.
And I think that I think the Eon Anywhere in this vicinity helps to equalize that right-left brain coherency, so they talk to each other. Because the way I do the muscle testing, I can check which side of the brain is more dominant. And what happens is when you put the Eon on and it works for him, both sides are strong, not just one.
Okay.
And so the whole autonomic nervous system, when it's centered and grounded and both brain hemispheres are firing, I think that's when we get that aha. That's when when we're in the zone. And that's what I think people mean by being lucky. Whether people, don't get mad at me if you don't win the lottery, okay? Because I think there's a lot of other issues related to, is it for your highest good? All this kind of stuff. But that's how we came about that. So I do use Ian a lot near the head, and in fact, this combination of X39 near the belly button or even on the belly button, and Eon is a great combo for calming. Just people get nervous and anxious symptoms, and their heart is racing. And I find that either two Eons or an X39 and Eon just kind of, calms people right down.
Just as an aside, with the energy patches and Icewave, a number of years ago, I was at a conference, and this is actually predating the Eon patch. We had glutathione and carnosine back then. And there was a couple that came to the booth at the conference, and we were doing patching demos there. And she had been in an automobile accident and had suffered a concussion and had some brain swelling. And she wanted to try the patches for pain relief. So I went through all of the usual protocols, and she said she was at a 10 on a scale of 0 to 10. So she was in extreme pain. And the best that I could do was to bump her down to an 8 or a 9. And I didn't want to give up because I felt as if there was a protocol or there was something that I wasn't doing that she could benefit from. And so I thought, I'm going to switch to auricular therapy. And I applied a white patch on the right earlobe and a tan patch on the left earlobe. And as you were mentioning, Dr. Dennis talking about the mapping of the body, you can think of the ear as being connected to the rest of the body. So the earlobe connects directly to the brain. And within seconds, she went down to a 3, a 2, a 1, and then a 0.
Wow.
And yeah, her whole disposition improved, and it was really incredible.
Great story.
These points are very powerful, and they're definitely not to be underestimated. Okay, so X39 and glutathione. You know, what's interesting to me about glutathione is that clinical studies continue to show, and there's tens of thousands of them, that life expectancy, lifespan are directly connected to the body's levels of glutathione. And it's very easy to see why. Glutathione's the body's master antioxidant, very high concentrations in the liver, not surprising. Glutathione is found in nearly every cell in the body, and it's so powerful that it can actually protect the DNA from damage. I even saw a clinical study where the DNA was damaged, and because the glutathione levels were elevated, it protected the DNA, and that damage did not make its way to the next cell division, to the new cell that was produced. So glutathione serves many, many valuable functions in the body. And of course, there's any number of different ways that we could use X39 with glutathione.
Well, and you know, the protocols that you have here are the ones that I really like as well. Liver 3 is a very powerful point in the body, similar to large intestine 4. And I have to say, I probably use this point the most for me personally. And there's a lot of people with liver type stress and liver energy imbalances in Chinese medicine. We talk about that, liver stagnation and all sorts of imbalances related to the liver. So I love that you put liver 3 here, because that for glutathione is one of my favorite points to use liver 3.
Now, there's another interesting point here. Actually, liver 3 is on the top of the right and the left foot. And there's an
yeah. Although it's the left foot, usually we patch it with the right foot, but they didn't sell a right foot, David, sorry. So I just have a left foot here. So.
Okay, well, we'll improvise then, and it'll be, that's exactly the point. Now, there's another point here. It's not shown correctly in the illustration, but this is on the what's called the ileocecal valve. And this can end up actually balancing a great deal of the way the energy flows through the body. And this point is if you went from the belly button and you went to the waist, but on a diagonal to the right side of the waist. So just picture drawing a line like a 45-degree angle from exactly there, from the belly button down towards the waistline, 45-degree angle. And it's about 2-3 inches from the belly button.
Right, yeah, so it's like that little hip bone that people can feel in the front, and they feel the belly button, and it's partway down there. I usually say it's well, it depends whether you're lying or standing, but about halfway between there is good enough. It's close enough. So that's great, the ileocecal valve. I didn't know that's I was wondering what this picture was, but
yeah, it's off on that picture. I don't know how that picture made it there, but you know, that would be if someone uses their index finger and they apply some deep pressure, they may find that the point's very sensitive. When people have acid reflux, that point can close up and be very sensitive. So in any case, that's something if someone's never tried it, I would encourage them to try either the Eon or the glutathione patch at that point.
Great. I definitely the Eon patch. I did a little mini micro training, and it's on YouTube, by the way, on people that had like hard stools or constipation type symptoms. And I got this actually from Dr. Quila. One of her colleagues said that if you just put an Eon patch on the ileocecal valve area, that makes people poop better. So whether it's too open, where people have diarrhea, or it's too closed, where people have constipation, it seems to help regulate that valve area. And so the constipation or diarrhea is better. And so people have tried it and said absolutely it works for them. So it's cool.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. All right. Yeah. Now let's talk about carnosine a little bit. I often think of carnosine as one of the most valuable nutrients that most people are not taking advantage of. Carnosine is stored in the brain, in the heart, in the skeletal muscle. It's been linked to some very, very impressive life extension. Early tests shows in mammals that carnosine might be capable of extending lifespan 30 to 40%. That's certainly what it shows in animal testing in mice and rats. Whether or not that translates perfectly over to humans, we'll see. We did a study with Dr. Tom and Helen Budzinski a number of years ago, showing that age-related cognitive decline could be reversed after only 30 days of carnosine. And of course, we've shown that with X39 as well. So if someone was looking for benefits of improved cognitive function, better speed of brain processing, short-term, long-term memory, can't make any medical claims, support of the health of the heart and the brain. Of course, improved athletic performance. Carnosine is a mild anabolic, so it can contribute to improvements in strength and stamina. This is an amazing combination for a whole variety of reasons.
Yeah, I agree. So let's take a look at some of the points that you recommend.
Yeah, so carnosine, I think it's worth saying, we didn't mention this with the other patch combinations, but my personal opinion is that the Eon patch can be used either day or night, depending on the outcome. And I actually really like the Eon patch at night. It's because of the number of patches we have now. And also, as you know, I like to experiment from time to time and create new patches. So I might at any one time have one or two experimental patches on. And so I tend to use the Eon patch at night. Carnosine, I'd love to get your take on it, because I have a hard time sleeping with carnosine on, or I should say I sleep fine, but it's my mind is awake the entire night. So I just prefer to use carnosine during the day. And then just to wrap up the conversation, from my perspective, the glutathione patch I would only use during the day because of the detox. But what's your take on Eon, glutathione, and carnosine, day versus night?
I have used carnosine both day and night. And one of the reasons I use carnosine at night is because of the number of patches that I use during the day.
Okay.
And I think part of it's theory, not necessarily experience, but theory, because carnosine is so I think of carnosine as repair, like restore, repair. So, and I think of nighttime and sleeping as a repair time. So I actually have been using personally X39 and carnosine at night versus during the day. Now, I use it during the day as well. But during the day, I tend to use the energy enhancer patches, the Eon, the SP6, and sometimes the glutathione. And the SP6, we did not talking about that today, but the SP6 I find really, really helpful for my intermittent fasting, to be able to go long periods of time without eating solid foods, and just keeping my blood sugar super level. And I just find that I'm not looking in the cupboard for stuff to eat late at night, like crackers and cookies and whatever, chips. And I just, with the SP6, has really helped. But I think with the carnosine, I really like it at night, and so does James, because he just finds that we just get up and we're not sore after all that workout.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely worth experimenting with. Everyone's going to respond a little bit differently to each of the patches, but definitely from a technical point of view, carnosine can be used during the day or at night, so no issue there. And then also the patch placements with carnosine are fairly interesting. I might want to talk to you about this placement on the right temple, because when I've used it there, and again, when I've used it at night, it's like my mind is awake and I feel awake, but I'm actually sleeping. I don't know. It's so experiential. Someone would just have to do it and see what I'm talking about. And I suppose it's not surprising when you consider that our patches definitely improve the bioelectrical activity of the body, and carnosine is going to produce bioelectrical activity in the brain, which is quite favorable. So I suppose that makes sense. But what's your experience with carnosine on the temple?
Well, the only time I've actually used it is when I had a lesion there on my face. I'm trying to think of, there's a couple of instances. A friend of mine said, oh, you got to try this supplement. It's the greatest thing, whatever, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll try it. So this is many, many years ago, and it was called laminin. And I tried it and got this humongous zit on the side of my
That's wonderful.
and I was like, yay, not. So I thought, okay, maybe that's just massive detox. So I used carnosine there and it just closed right up overnight. It was, so fast. Now, I haven't used carnosine a lot on the head and neck area because I have other orthopedic issues that I prefer it to work on, because I have some fascia that's really, really tight near my ankles and my calves. And so I'm working on them manually, as well as carnosine kind of ideally like softening that area, because we know carnosine works really well in softening scar tissue, at least in my experience. However, the times that I do recommend the carnosine here. I'll tell you one case. A friend of mine had diabetes and type 1, and she bled into her eyes and she became partially blind, and she was very, very afraid of that because her whole family went blind in her 40s, and it was almost like, talk about mindset, she hit 40 and she started becoming blind. And so I sent her some patches, and she said her eye felt like a stone cold piece of rock. So I said, what I want you to do is, I know you've had these laser surgeries, and I would really like to help you support the repair of your eye. So I'm going to have you put Icewave on a mask and put carnosine in the middle. I just figured, both eyes were affected. So after a couple of weeks, I didn't hear back. And she says, well, I had to have another surgery. I'm like, what? And she said, yeah, the surgeon said the scar tissue is really, really bad in my eye. He thinks that I'm going to be blind forever. And she was like crying and upset. I said, well, did you use the patch? She goes, no, I was waiting for after the surgery. I said, no, now, use them now, tonight. And she's like, okay. So she didn't like the mask. So she decided she was going to put Icewave on the temples and put the carnosine in the center. And she said immediately that cold stone eye just felt warm, like normal. And the surgeon, checked her and said, wow, that's so much better. Like the scar tissue was better. She didn't need another surgery. She can now drive. So she's not blind. Yay.
Amazing.
Yes. And so with people with some eye issues that need repair, I think about carnosine near this area. And I said, look, if it's right eye, put on this part, the temple, the left eye, you can put here or here. Sometimes we use other patches, sometimes X39 as well. And what's really interesting is funny because my girlfriend said, oh, by the way, my wrinkles are gone because she put the carnosine here.
Oh, you just caught the attention of a lot of people now. Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about that third eye point, because I think it really gets a bad rap in Western medicine. It's thought of as being something, rather mystical. And to, just discuss this for a moment, that point, bioelectrically, the nerve endings there connect directly to the pineal gland in the center of the brain. Now, just that word pineal gland, right, those words, is going to conjure up some Eastern mysticism. But what's important to realize is that the pineal gland is going to release at least thousands of different neurohormone precursors that are going to regulate the hypothalamic activity. So it is often thought of and taught that the hypothalamus is the control center of the brain. And of course, you have the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which work together to do things like regulate the immune system and the body's response to temperature variations, the body clock, and so forth. But you could really build the case that that's not entirely true, that it's really the pineal gland that is helping to orchestrate and regulate the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So when we're talking about stimulating that point, the reason really is to help to regulate and balance out the bioelectrical signaling in the pineal, which is going to regulate every single other biochemical process in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And this is something David, I've learned so much from you that I didn't learn in medical school. Because you read a lot more papers than I do, and this is unfortunately true of most clinicians, because we're so busy seeing patients that we kind of know what we know. We know what we're taught and what we're trained, and we don't spend a lot of time reading new papers. We might see a summary here or there, and then our medical journals are full of like this drug and use this drug and this drug trial, and they get kind of bored after a while learning about all the new drugs and what they do. And so something like this, I learned from you, and Dr. Dennis and saying just like, but when you guys said it, I was like, oh my gosh, that really resonated with me. Like it made sense. We've been taught that the hypothalamus is the master gland, of all the glands. That's why they call it the PTA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, adrenals. But I think we have to rewrite these medical books. I think this new information about the pineal and how important it is, which totally makes sense from the mystical point of view, of course, but from the medical point of view, yeah, we are way behind in medicine on that knowledge.
We are, and we're going to go ahead here and talk about Icewave because there's so much, we could go down so many rabbit holes on the pineal gland and the value that it has in aging, longevity, overall health of the body. It's really an extraordinary subject to delve into. Well, a lot of people are suffering with pain. And of course, for many years prior to X39, the way that our members were building their business was with Icewave. Because we can get pain relief in 2 to 3 minutes. And of course, there's any number of ways that we could use them in this way. Of course, one of the methods developed by our friend Dr. Haltiwanger, who we honored recently, was the clock method. He was a genius in so many different areas. And part of that genius was to figure out, hey, you put the stand patch on the pain and you just move the white patch around in a circle like a clock and until you find the best place. And of course, this protocol works beautifully along with many others.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the X39, one thing I didn't mention before that I'll mention now is that I know that science-wise, you've tested the back of the neck point and below the belly button as very important, powerful points, and that's why it's recommended, because you actually have science behind it. As a clinician, I find that the back of the neck point, very, very close to the brain, brainstem, etc., is one of my, quote unquote, brain balancing points. And I think that for people that have any sort of neurologic or need neurologic support, I think the X39 is really awesome there. And below the belly button, what I've noticed is that in my patients that have gut imbalance, so they have like extra permeability in their gut from eating, GMO foods, too much sugar, surgeries, antibiotics, steroids, birth control pills, etc., that the X39 below the belly button, well, anywhere, but particularly the belly button, really helps to repair the gut much, much faster than without the X39. And because we know there's trillions of other cells, good bacteria, if you will, that are in that space that helps with our vitamins and digestion, having a healthy gut is really important. And pain oftentimes, especially low back pain, is really highly connected to the gut being out of balance. So if you think of the intestines leaking fluid because they are damaged, that pools in your pelvis and your abdominal cavity, and there's nerves there. There's all sorts of materials, and everything's touching. It's not like in an anatomical model where there's all the space, right? Things are touching. So I even think that it's possible that this imbalance in the gut can actually really contribute to deterioration in the spine. So having the X39 on the gut is one of my favorite points for pain relief, because I know the gut is so incredibly important in many diseases, including autoimmunity, allergies, things like that. And then, of course, adding the Icewave for symptom relief. Here you've got, lower back as another example. If you put the X39 on the front and you've got the Icewave on the back, you're actually creating a triangular coherent shape, if you will, within the pelvis. And that's where a lot of the action is.
Yeah. That actually is quite an interesting subject of how triangular patterns appear in the body in acupuncture. Again, another subject for another time, perhaps, but correctly stated. We also recommend applying Icewave on the bottom of the feet. And this in acupuncture is the kidney 1 points, as you know. And one thing that I've always found very interesting with this is that in Korea, they have something called the longevity walk, where they try to train people to walk and apply pressure to kidney 1. Kidney 1 has also been thought of as this bone washing point, cleansing of the bone. And I've often thought that what we're going to find is that when you stimulate kidney 1, it causes the liberation of stem cells in the bone marrow out into the blood, and it increases the number of circulating stem cells. And this is why it's a longevity point. I don't think that's ever been, that's my theory. And maybe someday that we'll see if that's correct or not. But in any case, one thing that we definitely know is that stimulating those points produces a relaxation response in the body. And anyone that's suffering with pain, when you energize this meridian, it's going to produce very, very rapid reductions in pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used to call that the whole body protocol, with the white on right, tan on left on the bottom of the foot, and fairly easy to do. And then now that you have the X39 in the center line, you've created a humongous triangle now, sacred geometry, if you will, coherent frequencies in the body. So that's probably one of my favorites, is that Icewave on the bottom of the feet, and then X39 and or Eon, in the center line.
Yeah, I apply the energy patches to the bottom of the feet about 3 days per week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It may be too much. It may be okay, but that works for me. All right, and then finally, we're going to talk about sleep, which of course is one of the things that we started with today. And we'll be talking about silent nights and Alavida. Of course, you can use either. They're going to work very differently. Silent nights is going to cause an increase in melatonin, whereas Alavida is designed to increase epithalamine, which is produced in the pineal gland. So, of course, a number of ways that we can use this. And in this particular circumstance, we have a note here that X39 is during the day, but as you've pointed out, you can certainly use X39 at night as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Alavida, I think, I hope you don't mind me telling a story, but when David was testing this out, so he's sending me this patch, and you got the instructions, I'm putting it here, and where else in the brochure, and I said, David, wow, this is like a consciousness patch. And you do that smiley thing that you do, and you don't say much because you couldn't really tell me too much, but you said, well, it's an antioxidant. And, and you did mention epithalamium, which I knew nothing about. And I said, yeah, but I have so much spiritual power. And I was thinking, oh, you're going to, are we going to market this as access consciousness is going to help everyone's consciousness. We become more loving and harmonious. I was so excited, right? And then it comes out as a skincare line. I was like,
yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
Is this the same patch? And you're like,
right.
Oh, yeah, we need data,
Yeah.
So I love it at night. The funny thing is I muscle test myself, and I actually don't need it anymore, but I do, still do that as far as maintenance. And then I do recommend for people, especially those that have females, especially with known hormonal issues, I'll say, do one of these at night to help to stimulate that, pineal balance of all the endocrine system.
Yeah, over the years, people have had very, very intense experiences with Alavita. And if that's something that someone wants to experience, then I would recommend placing it at the third eye point, which is in the illustration right in the center of the forehead. And the reason is that we're activating the pineal gland, and people have these waking dream states, out-of-body experiences, which I've experienced with Alavita. It's a little bit intense. Not everyone is predisposed to it, but if it happens, don't be surprised. So I would recommend that if someone is having a problem sleeping, first they go back and they listen to the webinar that I've just done on silent nights and sleep, and I think they'll find that interesting. But when it comes to silent nights and Alavita, definitely try both to see which one you prefer. And then also, I would recommend using Eon with either Alavita or Silent Nights if someone's having a problem sleeping. And by the way, Dr. Karen, how do you feel about that combination, Eon Silent Nights or Eon Alavita?
Yeah, that's actually a really common one that I used to use in the clinic quite a bit. This was before the X39. As you know, the X39 alone helps people with deeper sleep. In fact, when I first started using X39, because I've been using patches for many, many years and fairly healthy, I didn't really notice anything, at the beginning. I didn't really notice anything. But what I did notice is when I switched to nighttime, I noticed that I stayed asleep longer, and it seemed to be deeper. I already thought I slept really deeply. Like my dreams were always Technicolor, it was awesome, but I felt like I was more rested even. So that was really cool. But for my patients, I find that if the X39 for whatever reason is not enough, then I will often recommend either Silent Nights, Alavita, or Eon, or a combination of those, depending on what works best for them and what else is going on. Like I said, for women, for example, with hormonal issues, as one of their primary symptoms, I might go Alavita Eon instead of Silent Nights Alavita or Silent Nights Eon. But if I feel like it's a possible melatonin issue, or they've had positive effects with melatonin previously as a pill, then I might go with the Silent Nights. But the funny thing I did want to share with you with the Silent Nights, I know this isn't about sleep at the moment, but and many of us have done this. We've actually used it during the day, David, for people that have that symptom of severe anxiety where their hearts are racing and they feel that doom and gloom is coming or whatever. And I've used this emergently in people where I've used a combination of Silent Nights and Eon during the day. And it just kind of shuts that off. In fact, one of them, he said I could use his testimonial. His name's Jason. And he's had probably over a decade of just feeling everything, just over, his body was overwhelmed with all these sensations. He was a highly sensitive person, like one of my tribe. And so I said, okay, we're gonna pull out some multiple patching protocol for you. So I had him put an Eon in that relaxation point behind the ear, one right on the belly button. Interestingly, that's an alarm point, CV8. And then we actually ended up having him stack Silent Nights on this one. And he said it was just like everything just drained, like that anxiety feeling just drained from his body. His body felt peaceful. He said the first time in a decade. And he joked, he says, I'm never taking these off. Where have these
Awesome.
been all my life? Anyway, so I was
Incredible.
just so pleased for him.
I found a clinical study recently that we posted to social media, and this was a study that was showing that acupuncture was better than pharmaceutical drugs for the treatment of age-related prostate inflammation. So, of course, this is an issue, and I'm bringing it up now because many men have a problem that they have to get up in the middle of the night, they go to the bathroom, and then they have a hard time getting back to sleep. And I wanted to see if I could find a patching protocol for this because somebody that I know has this issue. And fortunately, two of the points that were used in this protocol are incredibly easy to self-apply. They're CV4 and CV3. So they're stimulated simultaneously. Another point that was used in the protocol was on the back, the very, very lower back, bladder 32. But in any case, the application, so the feedback that I got was the application of the Eon patch and Silent Nights on CV4 and CV3 was able to allow this man, to sleep through the night and not having to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Now, whether or not prolonged use of that protocol would reduce the inflammation in the prostate, that would be a very interesting subject for a clinical study. So we don't know the answer to that, but we do know that stimulating those acupuncture points can have those benefits based on that study.
And did you tell him which point to put which patch?
We don't have enough information to know. So the instructions were apply the Eon and the Silent Nights and use them on either point. I'm not sure if it would matter.
Where that is for folks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would matter or not. That would be something we need to find out in a clinical study.
Okay, that's exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I think with that, this has been a little bit longer than what we had planned, but it was amazing. It flew by. And I know that our community is going to love the information. So, Dr. Karen, I want to thank you for your time today in going through this and sharing your wisdom and your experience. And I know everyone that sees this is really going to appreciate your participation. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. But before we say goodbye, I did want to ask you, and I just remembered why you put on the last slide, why you said side of the neck. So I know everyone's going to ask me that afterwards, and it wasn't one of my points. So do you have a quick answer to the why you suggested side of the neck for the Alavita or Silent Nights?
Oh, yeah. Actually, what I've applied there is either Alavita or Eon. And, after a long day, if I've had any neck tension, I will apply a patch, and I'm not going for any one specific point. I'll just take my index finger and I'll say, that one's a little tight right over there. And I just put the patch on it when I wake up in the morning. My neck and shoulders are nice and loose. So I'm not going for any other effect than relaxation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's always a pleasure, working with you. And I think, we are just so lucky to have a leader, CEO, and brilliant man at the helm of this company. And you have such integrity and honesty. And that's very, very valuable, especially these days. So we really appreciate you and also your amazing team by getting this education out there and supporting us distributors and clinicians.
And it really is a team effort. We do have an amazing team and an amazing community at Lifewave. So thank you, Dr. Karen, and you have a wonderful evening.
You as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.